Okay, now that you've finished my list of things, your player should be on the screen, should be able to move, should be able to fire and fire a missile and play some sounds. So if you had any problems, you can look at my code here, but hopefully you were able to figure it all out. But this is all the code I needed in order to do the things that I did. I chose to use top-down movement behavior to run my player, and but you may have chosen to hard code it in so you could use WASD since you don't have arrow keys. So the next part here is we need to give the player some hit points. So whenever the enemies, especially the enemy missile, hits the player, it takes away points from the enemy. Okay, or sorry, it takes away points from the player, not the enemy. So we're going to go over here, and we have to add a variable to the object, and we're going to add a hit point variable, and we're going to make the player have 100 hit points. So now we can go over to the event, and we can do some stuff with that. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new event. And we're going to create an event of when the player is in collision with the enemy missile. And so I'm going to click on player, click on collision, and then enemy missile. So whenever the player collides with the missile, we are going to want to take 10 hit points away from the player. We're going to want to destroy the missile. We're going to want to play a sound, and we're going to want an explosion to show up. Okay, so that's kind of our goal here with this. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce the amount of hit points player has. Okay, and so we're going to go over to player, and we're going to modify the variable of an object. We're choosing hit points, and we're going to subtract 10 hit points from it. Then we're going to go in and we're going to add a sound in here. So we're going to pick a sound that sounds like laser hitting something. So I particularly liked this two-tone effect, so that's the one I'm going to choose. I'm going to reduce the amount of hit points from the missile because I want the missile to get destroyed. So I'm going to change missile, and I'm going to modify the variable hit points, and I'm going to subtract 10 from it, losing some points. And once it loses that 10, it's going to hit the 0 condition, which then right here makes it so it will delete the missile. And then the last part is we're going to add an explosion that happens at the player. So then we're going to create an explosion. So we need to create an object, create an object, and then we're going to create it at the location of the player. So then we're going to go find the position X and Y of the player on both sides. And then I'm going to choose center, because I like the idea that that explosion is going to happen at the center and not at the upper left-hand corner. So explosion happens in the center. Our explosion is looping, right? So when we hit play, it's just sitting here doing this, right? And technically, all I really wanted to do, so I'm going to uncheck the loop. All I wanted to do is do it once. So you'll notice that it's going through the animations once here. That's all I want to see. Boom, and then I want it to disappear. But we have to code that in, okay? And because if we don't, it'll animate and then go up and down, but the animation, the last frame of the animation will still stay there. And so there's a way to delete it after it's done animating. Okay, this is done in 2 steps, and the first one is just making the object happen, And then the second step is then adding a new event. So once we get to a certain frame of the animation, we'll delete the animation. But before we do that, I want to show you what it looks like. So right now, when it gets hit, see, the animation happens, but it stays, okay? And I can also see that even though that the animation is being created at the center of the player, it's still choosing that upper corner, and I'm eventually going to go and fix it so the animation goes to the center of the ship. And then something else that I'm noticing here, my animation is below the ship. Eventually we're going to change the layer of the ship so it's down at the very bottom and the animation will be on the top. So there's some things in here I want to fix. But for now, I want to just be able to delete that explosion. So we're going to add a new event, and we're going to create a condition where it looks for the animation of the frame of the explosion. So we're going to look at the explosion, and then we're going to find the animation frame. Okay, so in the current frame, we're going to choose when it is equal to and there's 5 frames in there. When it's equal to the 5th frame, and it starts counting at 0. It starts 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once it gets to the 4th frame, so 4, we're gonna have it delete the explosion. So we're gonna click on the explosion and delete an object. We can go check that out and see what happens. Now it looks like I got a bunch of explosions, happening, but once the explosion's done, it just disappears. But I'm really annoyed about where it's sitting right now. So I'm gonna play with that. So I have the explosion. This is the explosion code right here, and I can tell that in the center it's sitting over here. So it's picking this upper left-hand point, and really I want this upper left-hand point to move. And I can tell that center is probably not the best spot for it. And so I'm gonna get rid of center. And I'm gonna see what that did to it, because now it's gonna move it up and around, and it might be center enough that I won't complain. And it's kind of creating it over in the kind of on the left hand corner, so it's right here. And so I'm gonna move it over like 10 pixels to the right. And so I can do that by editing this, right? So I'm gonna move it over, so I'm gonna add 10 pixels to it and see if that changes enough that my missile will then look more in the center. And that's a lot closer. And it looks like I probably could do some more. Maybe another 5. So I'm gonna change this again to 15. And then something else I'm gonna do while we're sitting here, because this is getting really hard to see. We're gonna go ahead and change the layer of this player. I want the player to sit below all the objects. That way I see explosions and things. It looks like it's rolling over the top. So I can go and click on the properties panel of the player here, which is found right here. And then I can go over here to the Z order. The Z order is the order of which all objects sit above and below, coming in and out of the screen. So in this case, I want it to be below everything, and I want it to have the farthest first position on the screen before I start stacking stuff on it. So I'm gonna put a -1 in here. That -1 will make it down at the very bottom of my Z order. And then when I play the game, my explosions and everything should come up to the top. Now my missile, maybe I'll change my missile at some point in time. But now when I see my explosions, they're almost perfect on top. Okay? That's close enough. I could tinker with this some more and really move it around and do stuff if I wanted to, but for all intents and purposes, that's good enough for right now. we need to add a health bar to the player. Sure, we could have some points in here, but it's really cool to see a health bar right next to them and then see that health bar decrease as you take more damage. And we do that actually with the object painter. We're gonna draw a rectangle in here. So we're gonna grab and drag this on here. And then I'm gonna put it kind of in a spot right here. And then I just kind of drag it around just because I want to like visualize kind of what I think it's going to look like in this. So I know it's going to look something along the lines of that when I'm done. Okay. When we go and actually draw this health bar in, we're going to have it draw the health bar at the origin of the player, right? Then we're going to tell it to start drawing down into the back of the player a little bit, and then we're going to tell it how many pixels down we want, and then we're going to tell it the opposite corner, because once we know one corner and how far down, then we can tell it how far over to go, and then we're going to tell it the opposite corner so it knows how long to make the rectangle here. So we gotta add a new event in order to do that. And so we're not going to give a condition to this event because we want this condition to update itself every frame. So whenever there's damage, we want to make sure we're lowering this bar. And so we don't add a condition here. It's just going to happen all the time at the player's XY position. Okay. So now it's making it, but we need to tell the health bar or the object painter what to make once we put it there, okay? And then once we start drawing it, then we'll play with the XY position of the position of the health bar to help make sure that we move it down and around so it's centered on the plane. So the next thing we need to do is we need to draw with the health bar a rectangle. So we can pick rectangle right here. And so it's looking for its top side left X position, its top side left Y position, then the bottom side X position and Y position. Okay, so we're gonna tell it to go down on the player, and then we're gonna tell the Y to go down on the player, and then we're going to tell the X to move back eventually, and then we're going to tell the bottom side to be 10 lower so we get some thickness to our health bar, and then we'll tell the X position to be the length of the variable hit points. Okay, so 100 pixels basically. So we're going to pick that top position right now. Top position, we're going to tell it is going to be at 0. And then we're going to tell it that we want it to be 60 down from the X. So as it draws it up in that upper corner, we're telling it 0x, but we want it to go down 60y. This may or may not be enough. We'll adjust once we get there, okay? Then the other part is we want the X position. So we want it to be a length, so that X is the length of the hit point player variable. So we're gonna go and grab the variable, column variables, object variable, and we're gonna choose the player's variable, and we're gonna choose hit points. And so we know that it's going to be the length of the player's hit points. And then we're going to tell it that we want the Y to go down 10 more, so we'll have a thickness of 10 pixels. Let's go ahead and test this and see if it works, and then see how we need to move it around. So you'll see that we didn't move it down far enough. 60 wasn't far enough, so we need to move it down. And then this 100 hit points right here needs to also be centered, so it looks like we need to move it in a little bit. But you can tell once we start hitting missiles that our health bar is going to go lower. However, once we hit a certain spot, you'll notice that our health bar is going the opposite direction. Okay, And that's because we haven't destroyed the enemy. We haven't in the game yet. So we're gonna go and we're gonna play with exactly where this is drawing. And so one thing I know is it didn't go down far enough. It still needed to go down more. So I'm gonna lower it to 80 pixels, but I still want it to be 10 pixels wide, okay? So I'm gonna try that. This is much better, right? But something I'm noticing here is it's not quite in the center. I want this bar to be in the center of my airplane. So we're gonna go look at that. So one thing we haven't done is we really haven't decided how big the player should be. And so I like to make some easy math in here. And I'm gonna lock this into my square, and then I'm going to lock it or have it snapped to my squares. So I have it 3 squares wide and 2 squares tall. The reason I'm doing that, it helps me with some easy math. I know each one of these squares is 32 pixels wide. And I could find that out if I went into setup grid. It tells me my cell width and my cell height. And I could change these if I want. I can make them bigger or smaller. But I know they're 32. So that means this is 96 pixels wide. Now that we have that health bar, we want to move it back a little bit, but we want to have the position move based upon the player's position, and then have it draw a certain distance wide from there. And so we can move this health bar position back by 2. And the reason we're going to subtract 2 out of here is because we know that health bar is 100 long and our ship is 96 pixels wide. And so in order to center that up, we have to move it 2 this way, okay? So we're going to subtract 2 from the player position, which then will center up our health bar underneath our plane. Now, if this is too far away, you can go and fine tune this and move this closer or farther, but I kind of like where it's looking right there. We need to add an event allows the player's missile to take away hit points from the enemy, okay? So we're gonna add a collision of the player missile to the group of enemy. So we're gonna go in here, the player missile, when it collides, collision right there, collision with the group enemy, that then we're going to delete the missile. So we're going to delete the player's missile. So we're going to get rid of the player missile. Then we're going to reduce the hit points of that enemy group, whatever it is that we hit, by 10. So we're going to, the enemy group is going to have its variable changed minus 10. So we're going to modify the variable of the object. And we know that that is hit points. And we're going to subtract 10. And then we're going to play a hit sound. Okay, so whenever that happens, we want to have a little bit of audio in here. And then you'll need to choose something that you like. And I'm going to choose this shield down sound. Let's check that out. Let's make sure that works. And in fact, I'm going to hit save. So now as I'm playing, I should be able to... All right, I introduced a bug in here that I couldn't figure out, and I finally see what I did. When I made my variable here hit points, I made double quote hit points. By putting in the double quotes, I'm changing the name of the variable to something else, and so I got to change this to a no double quotes in here. So now it's going to modify the correct variable, and when my missile is now hit, which before they would not, it should, now deleting and killing off the other enemies. Okay? So now I can take out any missiles, enemies, asteroids, anything in my way. Okay? And then I can also test, right? There's 4. 1, 2, 1, 2. Take out a 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And destruct.